Hello Army, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because today's story is a genuinely beautiful one, the kind that reminds you why this fandom keeps finding new reasons to fall in love with these guys over and over again. We're talking about Baltimore, the second night of a stadium stop on the Ararang World Tour, a brand new hairstyle that immediately took over timelines, and a quiet, completely unscripted moment of kindness that ended up mattering even more than the hair everyone was talking about. Let's get into it. So let's set the scene first, because context always makes a story like this land the way it should. BTS brought the Ararang World Tour to Baltimore for 2 nights at M&T Bank Stadium in Maryland, marking the group's second stop on this particular East Coast stadium run after their earlier show in Foxborough. Baltimore rolled out the red carpet in a genuinely sweet, official way too, with Maryland's governor publicly posting a welcome message ahead of the show, and local transportation authorities issuing traffic and parking guidance to help fans get in and out of the area safely given the massive crowds expected. When a state government is putting out official transit advisories because of your concert, that tells you something about the scale of what these 2 nights represented for the city. Night 1 already generated plenty of buzz on its own, with fan cam footage circulating widely capturing high-energy performance moments from multiple members. But it was Night 2, the second and final Baltimore show, that ended up delivering 2 completely different but equally memorable moments, one visual and immediately noticeable, and one quiet, easy to miss if you weren't paying close attention, but arguably even more meaningful once you actually understood what was happening. Let's start with the visual moment, because it's the one that hit timelines first and fastest. Fans walking into Night 2 immediately noticed Jimin had switched up his hairstyle from the first night. If you've been following this tour closely, you already know hair has become one of the most consistently discussed elements of his overall look throughout this entire run. Publications and fan accounts alike have been tracking his hairstyling choices practically show by show. So when a new look debuts specifically for a second night in a particular city, that's exactly the kind of detail longtime followers are primed to notice immediately. The new style for Baltimore's second night moved toward a softer, half-up silhouette, hair pulled back and secured while still leaving movement and volume around the face, paired with his now familiar layered, textured length. It read as a slight shift in energy from some of his more dramatic, fully loose looks earlier in the tour, something a touch more refined without losing any of the boldness that's defined this entire hair era. Fans immediately started comparing it to previous looks from earlier tour stops, debating where it ranked, and generally doing exactly what this fandom does best whenever a new visual moment drops, turning it into its own mini-event within minutes of the first clip circulating. And honestly, that reaction makes complete sense given everything we've already talked about on this channel regarding his hairstyling choices this tour. When international outlets and hair industry professionals are already treating his individual looks as worth analyzing in detail, a new style debuting mid-tour is basically guaranteed to become its own standalone talking point the second cameras catch it. But here's where the story shifts into something genuinely touching, because while everyone was busy zooming in on the new hairstyle, something else happened during that same Baltimore Night 2 performance that, once fans actually processed it, ended up resonating on a completely different, much deeper level. At one point during the show, Jimin noticed a little girl in the crowd. She was wearing a distinctive headband styled after Chimmy, the yellow character he created that's become closely associated with his personal brand and fandom identity. Seeing a young fan specifically dressed in Chimmy-themed gear is already the kind of small, sweet detail that tends to catch a performer's eye. It's a very direct, very personal signal of dedication from a fan who's clearly put thought and care into showing up specifically for him. According to fans who captured and shared the moment afterward, Jimin seemed to notice that the little girl might have needed something warm, and without making any big performance out of it, without stopping the show or drawing extended attention to the moment, he simply took off the hoodie he was wearing on stage and gave it to her. No dramatic pause. No big gesture toward the cameras. Just a quiet, genuinely thoughtful action, the kind of thing that could have easily gone completely unnoticed if fans in the crowd hadn't happened to catch it on camera and share it afterward. That's honestly what makes this particular moment stand out so much once you sit with it. There was no performance to the kindness itself, if that makes sense. It wasn't done in a way that was clearly built for a viral clip or engineered for social media attention. It read as something closer to simple, genuine instinct, noticing that a child in the crowd might be cold, and immediately, without overthinking it, doing something about it. Fans who shared the footage described it in exactly those terms too, framing it as proof that his thoughtfulness isn't something reserved for big, obvious moments. It shows up in these small, easy-to-overlook gestures too, arguably even more so, because there's no audience specifically watching for it in that instant. Let's talk a little bit about why moments like this tend to resonate so deeply within this fandom specifically, because I think it's worth unpacking. There's a recurring pattern throughout this entire world tour of small acts of generosity showing up at pretty much every stop, items being gifted to fans, gestures of care toward people in the crowd, little details that go beyond just delivering a great performance and into genuinely engaging with the individual human beings who showed up to watch. And what's interesting about the Baltimore moment specifically is how understated it was compared to some of the more visually dramatic gift-giving moments from earlier stops on this tour. There was no elaborate lead-up, no visible emotional exchange captured up close, just a simple, practical act of noticing someone might be cold and doing something about it immediately. That kind of restraint, if you want to call it that, actually makes the gesture feel even more genuine to a lot of fans. It's easier to be generous when there's an audience specifically watching and reacting in real time. It's a slightly different thing entirely to notice a small detail in a massive stadium full of tens of thousands of people, process it, and act on it within seconds, all while simultaneously performing a full-scale concert. That kind of situational awareness, being able to stay present enough during an enormous, high-energy production to notice one specific child's comfort, says a lot about the kind of attentiveness that's become associated with him throughout this tour. Now, let's bring these two threads of the story back together, because I think that's really the heart of what makes this particular Baltimore night too so worth talking about. On one hand, you have this immediately visible, easily shareable moment, a brand new hairstyle debuting for the second Baltimore show, generating exactly the kind of instant buzz and comparison discussion that's become a hallmark of this entire tour's online conversation. On the other hand, you have this much quieter, easily missed moment of genuine kindness toward a young fan, the kind of detail that only surfaces because someone in the crowd happened to catch it on their phone and cared enough to share it afterward. And honestly, I think the contrast between those two moments happening on the exact same night is part of what makes this particular show stick in people's minds. It's a pretty perfect snapshot of the full picture fans have of him at this point in his career, someone who consistently delivers striking, carefully considered visual moments that generate genuine excitement and conversation, while also consistently showing up with a level of personal warmth and attentiveness that goes well beyond what's required of him as a performer. Neither side of that picture cancels out the other, if anything, they reinforce each other. The same person capable of debuting a bold new look that gets analyzed and discussed across multiple platforms is also the person quietly making sure a child in the crowd isn't cold, all within the same 2-hour show. Let's spend a little more time on the hairstyle itself, because I do think it deserves its own moment of appreciation here too. Throughout this tour, we've talked at length about how much attention his hair specifically has generated, from international media comparisons to detailed styling breakdowns from industry professionals. The fact that a new look debuted specifically for the second Baltimore performance fits into that larger, ongoing pattern of treating each tour stop almost like its own visual chapter, a continuously evolving look that keeps giving fans something new to track and discuss as the tour progresses city by city. That kind of consistency, delivering a genuinely new, carefully considered visual choice at nearly every stop, takes real intention. It's not something that happens by accident or through minimal effort. Whoever is working on these looks throughout the tour is clearly treating each city, sometimes even each individual night within a city, as its own opportunity to bring something slightly different to the stage. And fans have responded to that consistency exactly the way you'd expect, by paying incredibly close attention, by comparing each new look to what came before, by turning hairstyle debuts into their own recurring mini-events throughout this entire tour run. Now let's circle back to the emotional core of this whole story one more time, because I think it's worth sitting with a little longer. There's something genuinely lovely about the idea that a young fan, wearing a headband styled after a character created specifically to represent him, ended up walking away from that concert with something warm and tangible that directly connects back to that exact moment. It's the kind of thing that becomes a core memory, not just for the child in question, but for the family or friends who were there to witness it happen in real time. Concerts are always meant to be memorable, but moments like this elevate a single night from simply being a great show into something a lot closer to a genuinely life-defining memory, the kind of story that gets told and retold for years afterward. And that's really the through line connecting basically every story we've covered on this channel about him throughout this entire tour. It's never just about the scale of the production, the size of the stadiums, or even the artistic ambition behind the setlist and visual direction, though all of that consistently delivers too. It's about these smaller, more human moments layered throughout each show that end up defining how fans actually remember these nights. A striking new hairstyle gets people talking in the moment. A quiet act of kindness toward a child in the crowd is what people end up thinking about days, weeks, even years later. Let's also take a moment to reflect on what this pattern says more broadly about the culture that's built up around this entire tour and this fandom as a whole. Every single stop seems to generate its own unique combination of headline-grabbing spectacle and quieter, deeply personal moments, and fans have gotten remarkably good at capturing, contextualizing, and sharing both sides of that equation in real time. That's honestly part of what makes following this tour from the outside, as someone covering it rather than physically attending every single show, such a genuinely rewarding experience. You never quite know which specific detail from a given night is going to end up being the one that sticks, the flashy visual moment or the quiet human one, and more often than not, it ends up being some combination of both, exactly like what happened in Baltimore. Before we wrap up, I want to hear from you. Which part of this Baltimore Night 2 story stood out to you more, the new hairstyle, or the moment with the little girl and the hoodie? And has there been a moment from earlier on this tour that similarly caught you off guard with just how quietly thoughtful it turned out to be? Drop your thoughts down in the comments, I read every single one, and I genuinely love hearing which specific details end up sticking with all of you the most. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next update, because with this tour still rolling and each new stop bringing its own set of memorable moments, you can count on there being plenty more stories like this one to cover in the days ahead. Thank you so much for watching, I'll see you in the next video, and until then, take care of yourselves. Bye!